Not only from Community Foundation. All right.
Sorry, I
Well, my
just
name is
cut you
George
off, George.
Ferrari. That's okay. My name is George Ferrari, and I serve as CEO of Your Community Foundation. Welcome to part of our Grant Writing University. This is part of our ongoing commitment to provide opportunities to share resources and skills and conversation to develop your capacity and your technical skills for grant seeking, not only to Community Foundation, where we're always happy to see what you're looking for and the work that you're doing, but also to other organizations that provide funding. We do have information on our website about other local funders and some of their deadlines and opportunities. So today we are joined once again by the good folks at Choice Words. Amanda Heidel and Brianna Maloney will be providing you with information. And then we have opportunities to answer questions. Some of you already submitted those questions, but as questions come up, you can put them in the chat box. And very happy that you're here today. I'll turn it over now to Gloria Kwaku, who's our Chief Equity and Community Engagement Officer who produced this event today. Thank you, Gloria.
Hi. Thanks, George. Hi, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Gloria Kwaku, and like George said, I serve as your Chief Equity Community Engagement, and we're adding Grants Officer to my name because a lot of people don't know that I do the grant cycles as well. So most of you know who I am, and I'm really honored to forge those relationships with you and build and create new ones with new folks on the line. One thing we do like to do is name the intricate balance and dynamic relationship between funder and the community that it serves. So we acknowledge that as a funder, there is this power imbalance, and we know that our capacity to affect change, and that's lasting transformational change, only comes through strengthening the capacity, your capacity of our nonprofit partners like you all. So we've made this commitment to you, our community leaders, advocates, change makers, and culture creators, we like to say here at the foundation, to go beyond just awarding you a grant check. So handing you a grant check. And we want to help support you in other ways. So this grant writing workshop is part of the many ways that we support you to build capacity. And we want to see your organizations thrive in this community. So this grant cycle and for all future grant cycles will offer grant writing workshops, a grant cycle Q&A, one in which we have tomorrow, the opportunity to meet with me one-on-one to review your applications and also collaborate, bounce thoughts and ideas off one another, and also a drop-in coffee hour at Dunkin'. So stay tuned to the chat for more information on that. I'm going to put links in there. Grant cycle is a very difficult time, but it's also a time of learning and improvement. We heard your voices when you asked for more support. We heard your requests for grant writing support, consulting services, capacity building support, help, and so on. And on top of that, we also heard from our reviewers. So those individuals that are reviewing your grant applications, that grant writing is a struggle for some of you. And there was a huge gap between the well-written applications and those applications that need strengthening. And here we are now offering grant writing support before our grant cycles. So we thank you and acknowledge you for sharing your concerns and your thoughts. So we're asking to please share in the chat which organizations you're representing, where are you joining us from, and that sort of thing, to keep it interactive. And feel free, as George said, to write your questions there in the chat as we move along in the presentation. Welcome to everyone just coming in. I see some people jumping in. I see some great familiar faces and friends. I see Norb. Hi, Norb, my friend there. I see Amelia. Yay, Amelia. So again, welcome everyone. I'll pass the torch on to Amanda and Brianna. They're going to take good care of you guys. So take it away, you two.
Thanks so much, Gloria, and thank you everybody for joining. I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, one second. Here we go. Sorry, I should have did this ahead of time.
It's all good, no worries. I have put
It's
in the chat
all
just
good.
FYI links to our next grant cycle for the spring, links to the Q&A for that cycle that Gloria is doing tomorrow in a webinar, and then also a link to a page that includes other local funders for you to consider opportunities in addition to the Community Foundation.
I'll admit this is my first time back to work in 3 months because I was on maternity leave. So I'm having a hard time finding the presenting mode.
Present mode.
But I am in full screen.
Yes.
Amanda, I think if you go out of this, there was a button in the top right that said slideshow. I think that might be it.
This one here.
So as Amanda said, she was on maternity leave, so she has this beautiful, beautiful baby, but she is still making time to be with us this afternoon while the baby is sleeping. So we may have to pivot at some point in the conversation and discussion, and we may have to transfer presenters from Amanda to Brianna. So we just want to just let you know ahead of time.
I think, Amanda, if you go out of whatever mode you're in, it said present slideshow at the top. I don't know what mood you are in right now.
Like stop sharing, you mean?
No, you shouldn't have to stop sharing. Here, do you want me to share? Will that be easier?
That would be easier. Also, a new computer. Totally. All
Yeah,
the
maybe
things.
that's it.
Sorry, everybody.
Problem, Amanda.
Okay, so I think if we do
There you
this,
go.
is that working for everyone?
Yeah.
Perfect, it's great.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thanks so much, Brianna.
sure, take it away.
All right. So I'll have to do that thing where I'm like, hey, can you next? All right. So here Brianna and I are here. Thank you for your patience from Choice Words Ithaca. And so we are a grant writing and fundraising organization. Here we have a office at 120 West State Street, right across from the State Theater. And so we've been here for about a year and a half now. And who we are. So we are a fundraising firm that we help a multitude of different organizations from nonprofits to municipalities, educational institutions, and businesses to identify and acquire grant funding. And I myself am the Ithaca Grants Manager. And I moved here about a year and a half ago for personal reasons. And I was living in the Hudson Valley and working for Choice Words for about 4 years. And we felt like it was a good idea to, start a new branch over in this area. So my husband and I moved here, and we also have been we built a house. We actually transformed a pole barn in Dryden into a house that we were just finishing up. And so we are, newish to the area, but Choice Words has been an amazing opportunity to get to know so many folks locally. And then, Brianna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep, I've been with Choice Words for 14 years, almost 13 and a half since we started. I started the company with Steve Densmore, our boss down in the Hudson Valley. So I've been grant writing every type of grant pretty much for 14 years. And I've been visiting Ithaca for about 4 years, even before we knew that we were going to have a firm out there, just camping and enjoying all the trails, and really, really love it. So I'm jealous that Amanda's out there all the time.
Sometimes Brianna gets to come here for business related things and we get to hang out. It's fun. All right. So if you want to go to the next slide. So you're all here to learn a little bit more about grant writing, and I'm sure everyone has come in with, a different level of expertise. Some of you might know some of this, so it might be review, but others might be, beginner stage or in the middle. So no question is ridiculous. You can ask anything in the chat, but we're just going to kind of go through start off with some of the basics. And the basic for us is research. So starting off every single, like whenever you're looking to start your like fundraising journey, like doing all of the research to find the grants that you're going to apply for is really key. So there are several different directories that you can look to for different grant opportunities. Some of them are free, they're listed here. Some of them you do have to pay for, like an instrumental or things like that. But some of it could even be as simple as doing a Google search and going to like the fourth or fifth page and finding different opportunities, or even different organizations, not necessarily to compete with those that are similar to you within the same area, but organizations throughout New York State or even outside of New York State that would support the kind of work that you do. So starting with research is really important. And one thing that we do that I find really helpful is, and that might be transferable to what how you can set up your own little research journey, is you can create an Excel spreadsheet and have different columns where you are putting the funder, what their foundation aims are, what kind of grant ranges they offer, and then also all of the contact information and the deadlines. So then you can, from there, create sort of like a spreadsheet around when those deadlines are so that you can stay on top of all that research that you did. Because sometimes what happens is you do all the research and then it's like, oh my gosh, that one was due when? Oh no, I forgot about that one. So it's like, it can be really helpful to start out with doing all the research to create that sheet of all the opportunities. And then from there, creating, even if you just added it to like your Google Calendar or, created a specific spreadsheet where you can have all that information and you can create a whole system for yourself so that you can apply in ways that are, that you can be on top of it. Because one of the things that we'll also get to later in this presentation is staying on top of it and always applying for funding and not just doing it every once in a while. That could really help set you up for success. So next slide. So these are just some search tips that we have. So a big one is to check if they accept unsolicited proposals. So a lot of organizations or foundations, they already kind of like know who they're going to pick, or they kind of know where their money's going at some point, or they've supported so many different organizations over the years that that's kind of where they just continue to support, and they're not really accepting other applications. And even you could be doing the most amazing work, and if you send in an unsolicited proposal, like it stinks, but like sometimes it just won't get looked at, and it could just be a little bit of a waste of time. Sometimes there could be ways around it, where if you know someone on the board who could recommend that the foundation look at a letter of inquiry from you, that's one way around it. But that's definitely something to look for in the fine print on all the websites during your research, to make sure that they do accept proposals. And then a big one is to check geographic restrictions. I forgot to mention before too, we highlighted in red all of our tips and tricks that we'll review at the end. So you'll see in red, there's all like the big tips that we feel were important to highlight. One of them being check geographic restrictions. So that is such a big one. And sometimes it can be really tricky. Like you'll filter in research portals for the exact location, and they'll still bring up things outside of your location. So it's really important to really go through the websites. Even if you are using a portal, always going to the website and double checking and going through all of the fine print of the eligibility requirements, and honestly just calling sometimes if you're not sure. And they're almost all of these foundations are so responsive. So really just making sure that geographically you fit within the guidelines is the most important thing. Another thing that I thought I'm realizing should also probably be in red is check actual giving patterns via the 990s or website. So sometimes foundations have on their website a grant range that they offer, or they'll show what they have awarded organizations in the past that can kind of give you an idea of what you can ask for, because it's important to kind of go forward with like a realistic ask. Like you don't want to ask for $20,000 where their cap is 5,000. So it's important to be aware of what their giving patterns are. And if it's not listed on their website, what you can do is actually look at their 990s. And I remember Brianna showed me this when I first started, like 4 or 5 years ago. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever, because you can go into the 990s and you go down, several pages down, you'll see it's a whole section that says like grants. And within that section, it'll show you all of the giving patterns for that year. And so you can gauge what your ask is going to be based on that. So another thing is to check other eligibility requirements. So there can be very specific things that will make you eligible that you just want to be aware of. A huge thing is don't chase the money. So if you have a program or need that you're trying to like fit into what the requirement is for a grant, it's probably not going to work. So it's really important to like go for the grants that actually really fit what you need and what your organization does, because we've seen time and time again organizations who are like, well, we kind of fit within it, and like it's very slim that you'll get it because you just don't fit within the guidelines. And lastly, to check due dates against your funding needs timeline. So it's always important to remember that like grants aren't a quick turnaround. They are going to be awarded, in the future. So you don't want to ask for funding for something that's going to start before the funding is awarded. So it's important to look at that too. And next slide. Okay, so, how or why might you use a grant to fund your proposed project? There's wants and then there's needs. So we often see people come to us and they have a whole list of, the like pie in the sky things that they want. And then also like their very, very specific needs that they need to function as like an organization. And it can be hard to kind of differentiate, and which ones to go after first. And so we try and help people, get down to like the priorities. But something when you think about like what are your needs, like you have your programs and your projects. Almost all organizations need general operating support, which is amazing that the Community Foundation actually offers that kind of grant, because it's not always the case with many foundations. Capacity building, like how you can grow your organization. Professional development, this is a big one that you might need as you're growing as an organization. And then capital support, so this could be if you are redoing a building, or if you need equipment for something, like those are capital support projects. And then an event, so if you need money for an event, that would be your like actual need. So it's important to kind of identify what these things are so that you know what to search for. Next one. And alignment with guidelines is critical. So the elements of a strong proposal. So this is just a list of like, as Gloria was saying earlier, there was grants that were submitted that were stronger, but then there's grants that are submitted that could need some work. And sometimes, it's kind of like you're kind of trying to hit a sweet spot where you're giving all of like the bulk of the information about your organization, but it's also heartfelt and wonderful and talks about what you do, but also like gives data and things that like really help support your case. So these are just a list of things that you should consider, or we would recommend you consider as you're writing your grants. So you want to talk a little bit about your organizational background and history, the service area and population, and giving into context if it's not local, like where are you, geographically. you know, you can mention if your administration and staff, like if you're a really small organization, like we're, you know, a team of two, you know, running this. So it's important to also kind of give context to like the type of group that you are. You know, we're a group of volunteers. That could also be something that you would want to mention. The different programs, sometimes we do like a bulleted list of like what those programs are, just to give a, you know, an overview of what you do in a nutshell. And then you want to talk about your program project request. So those are things like, you know, it could be specific to a need that you have that is project specific, or it could be general operating, which look a little bit different. And then your need. So like, what's the need for this service that you're offering? Like if you're an organization with food distribution, like what is the need of who you're serving in the community? Talking about community collaboration. So who do you work with and the different partnerships that you work with within the community, and how you support each other. The impact and evaluation, we'll get to that a little bit further in the presentation. And then budgets. So most of them are going to ask for a project budget or a program budget, and also your like overall operating budget. So these are all things that you want to have on hand as you're getting ready to submit your applications. And a sustainability plan, like how's your organization going to continue? You know, how do you keep yourself afloat? How are things working? And then sometimes this will even be a question on the application in some instances, but strategy for if you don't win the grant, like what would you do? How would your organization, you know, recover from that? Next slide. Okay, so now we have a little bit of an interactive activity. So we have two different narratives, and it's going to come up on the screen. So there's statement 1 and statement 2. So we're just going to give you a couple minutes to read through what this, and you could just write in the chat what you think the difference is between these two statements. I'll also say the third paragraph is the same on each. So if you read one, you don't have to read the other. But you can feel free to unmute or write in the chat what you think the difference is. Statement 1 gets straight to the point. Okay. Statement 2 has more information about the organization, but does not include an ask or an articulation of a problem that the foundation can help solve. 1 is a specific ask, and 2 is unrestricted. The second one is more positive, doesn't lead with their needs and problem areas. These are all great. Statement 2 has more detail and information. Great. So we did this as a experiment because statement 1 is more of like a project statement. So something, if you were asking for a very specific need, you would want to, you're going to be talking about like this very specific thing in this case, which is a refrigerated truck. So you want funding to buy a refrigerated truck. In statement 2, this is unrestricted funding. So you're actually just talking about what your organization does and then supporting that with the need. So when you're writing an unrestricted grant application, you would set it up in that way. You would set it up saying, this is, you know, what my organization does. And then you don't have to talk about specifically how you would spend the money. And then in statement 1, you would need to talk about, this is what my project is. You know, if this is if you need to specifically say how you're going to spend that $10,000, then you do need to support that with what you would be buying with that. And we did this because the community foundation is unrestricted, so you can that funding is unrestricted, so you can think about how I think it could be hard sometimes to be like, oh my gosh, but I'm writing this whole thing, and like, how do they know they want to support me if they don't know what I'm going to spend the money on? But you know, it is actually, you know, there are two different ways to go about it, and so we wanted to kind of highlight that there. All right, so moving on, measurable impact is paramount. How do you do it? So, you know, you saw in there was numbers, there was data about like how many people are served or how many people are going hungry in a specific area. And so you want to also kind of try to collect your own data or be creative and look for different resources that actually have already created that data that you can help support your case. So funders really like to see that you are supporting your case with this data, with any kind of data that could be supportive. So it's important to be reasonable and thoughtful with the kind of information that you're sharing, and also how you're going to track your own data. So what do you have the capacity to measure? I think in general, across the board, we notice that a lot of people, this is hard to track your own data. You know, sometimes people are like, oh no, I need this like whole, you know, data collecting service or something like that. And in some cases, you know, maybe the way you have things set up, you do. But to be reasonable about like what you can actually measure is important. So identifying metrics to track. You want to try to identify like what you're actually going to track so that you can, when you write a grant proposal, you're often going to have to say like, we're going to reach X more people. Like, how are you going to track that? Or like, how are you going to prove your points? So everything should be ambitious but attainable. So nothing crazy, but like also, you know, not like we'll reach 2 more people or something like that. That's important. And to be creative. So that's another red mark. To be creative about the types of information that you're either sourcing from another research platform that you take that data from, or you get creative about identifying what metrics you're going to track and how you're going to do it.
Amanda,
also
if I can
important.
give
Yes, go ahead.
an example, because I think like I'm working with an organization who does mental health counseling. So they don't collect a lot of demographics because it's all confidential. And mental health just generally, I think, is really hard to measure the outcomes. It's a lifetime journey. There's no, okay, you finished, you're healed. You know, that's not what mental health is. So we had to kind of come up with some creative outcomes. And one of them is, you know, the number of referrals they get from a different service to them, or their ability to not have a wait list, to continuously be able to take people no matter what the demand is. So I think it's just, you know, being creative is sometimes just kind of thinking out of the box. Like, we don't measure the things that people necessarily are usually looking for, but what are we good at? What can we show specific impact in? And I think that's what being creative is really about with the outcomes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I also I'm thinking about we worked with a farm who has a lot of like educational programming in schools, and they did specific studies on kale specifically for like how many kids actually like ate the kale after, like, you know, or they chose the kale over something else. And so that was, you know, it's just it was interesting to me that they chose one specific vegetable versus like X amount of kids ate more vegetables. So, you know, being creative about how you go about it. And so then there's short-term and long-term goals. So differentiating between that. And then there's the impact on your community, you know, how that affects the region, the state, or the country. And then documenting your demographics, just knowing that documenting your demographics shows an understanding of the community that you serve. And that's often required in these grant applications. That'll actually be a question that you'll have to answer. And then if you are in this you know, if you're doing something with economic impact, you would want to document job creation or economic impact that could be useful for grant awards. And then there's reporting impact. So how do you collect data, outcomes, and impact? So, that's going back to what we were talking about before. How are you going to collect this data to use to support your case? Who's going to be responsible for this? So it's often like we've seen organizations where this could be like a whole job for one person to like figure out how to, collect all this data and like do the data collecting. Like I worked at a nonprofit before Choice Words where we were trying to collect the demographic data of a summer camp, and it was so much work. It ended up being like a part-time job for one of us. So it could be a lot. And so I think going back to Brianna's point about like keeping it simple and like where you what you do well, keeping it at that, I think that could be really helpful. And then sometimes with reporting, you're going to have to provide it to the funder. And so that could be, maybe twice a year, that could be once a year, that could be, it depends on whenever the grant cycle is. So it's making sure that you have an idea of what that looks like. And how will you share information with the grant maker and the general public? So that could look many different ways. Like we are also a public relations firm, and I know that like PR actually helps the grant writing process a lot. And so thinking about ways that you can share with the general public about what you're doing and all this information that you've collected. What will you do if you fall short of estimated outcomes? So, thinking through, all the scenarios of what that looks like. Brianna, did you want to add anything here?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it depends on the funder. If you fall short of estimated outcomes and they already gave you the money, then it's okay. Some of the other funders, they'll give it in quarterly installments, or if you want to go for it year after year. I think it's just important to give a really detailed reason of why you did fall short of outcomes. And, sometimes there are really good reasons. Like, of course, during COVID, a lot of my clients, they expected restrictions to ease a lot faster than they did. So they would write a grant assuming they'd be at full capacity in a year. That was understandable. That's an easy example, but still things like that happen. Sometimes a capital improvement's needed, or you lose a staff member, whatever it is.
Things happen, life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of you might be in the beginning part of your journey. And so, what's a grants program? So like your organization, to become sustainable with your funding streams, it would benefit you to create a grants program internally. So that would consist of, the research like we identified in the beginning, and then like we talked about earlier as well, continuously raising money. So you're not always reinventing the wheel. So it's not like, oh, we want to do this program, we need to see money for that. Like to just always be doing it. And that goes back to that grants calendar. So that you know what the opportunities are that suit you best, and like what you're gonna apply for with that for each one. And a multifaceted approach. At Choice Words, we talk about this like three-legged stool, because it helps, visually, think about what that looks like. What's a multifaceted approach for a grants program? There's like the grants, and then there's also the things like fundraisers and galas and things like that. And then a lot of organizations also have something like, if you're a farm, you have a CSA. So you have something where you're like actually bringing in revenue or something like that. Like I'm thinking about this environmental group that I work with as well, and they have they like are able to table at a farmer's market, and they bring in income that way as well. So there's many different ways you could do it. There's so many creative opportunities to bring in different kinds of funding. We also have seen many organizations do well with like GoFundMe campaigns and donor letters that are directly sponsorship letters that are directly out to the community. So there's many different ways you can go about it. And then building a grants culture or organization-wide buy-in. So like some board members or other members of the organization might not feel like it's important to do to write grants and receive funding in that way. And, it could be helpful to, explain to those people why that is important. And also identifying a person on your team or outside of your team to actually, help you move the grants along, because it can eat up a lot of time for one person on your team. And so, making it sustainable would be, having one person do it and then creating a system around where it could create a culture around, okay, we collect data, we do this, we do that. Everyone needs to be involved in some way. And then lastly, being prepared to submit a strong application. So we hopefully, gave you some tools today about, what it looks like to submit a strong application. And we feel that that is one of the most important things to creating a grants program and making it sustainable is getting that language together. And sometimes that could be the hardest thing, is to get all the language together in the beginning. And then from there you can copy and paste certain things, or you just have the bulk of the stuff that you need once you get that language together. Okay, so to review all of our red Where's Waldo find things that we had in the presentation, the tips and tricks. So you look at similar organizations and who is funding them to see if they would be a good fit for you as well. Check geographic restrictions, don't chase the money, get creative with finding compelling data and creating your own data, and don't assume someone knows anything about your organization. So, going back to, when you're writing a letter of inquiry or a grant application, if you're located within Tompkins County, like if you're applying for something that is outside of Tompkins County, like giving some context around where is Tompkins County? Like what is Tompkins County like? Like what are the types of people that live here? Giving some context so that you want to almost act like you're the person reading it that has no idea what you do and no idea where you are. And so that they better understand where you're coming from. And so those are our tips and tricks and some of our advice. And then we also have some training and resources here. The Grantsmanship Center, I know Brianna and I have both done a few training sessions with this center. You do have to pay for it, but I think it's worth it. It's very in-depth and you learn a lot, and there's all types of different programs that you can do. There's one specifically for federal grants. There's one specifically just for entry level, how to write a grant, and it's interactive. So you actually you end up writing a proposal and submitting it to the group, and people read it over and give you advice. It's really helpful. And these are just some other training and resources that you can kind of lean on to help you in your journey. And now we have some time for Q&A. I know there was one question that was submitted, Gloria, but.
Yes, well, thank you for the wealth of lots of great information there. And we had one question saying, or asking if the presentation will be available, and we will post it up on our website once the video finishes converting on my computer. So that will be up. But we did have one question in advance during registration, and I'm asking you all to put your questions down in the chat. Like Amanda said, there are no questions that are dumb questions or silly questions. We welcome all of your questions because we have about 15 minutes together. So the one question that we did get was, let's see, we want to know more about what kinds of projects funders are interested in funding. We have a variety of new initiatives at our school that address different needs in our community, and it would be great to know what is most appealing to funders.
Okay, I think Amanda might have to hop off or be less present, so I'm going to take over the questions. But I wouldn't say, when you ask what are funders most interested in funding, it depends mostly on the funder. there's pretty much a funder out there for almost anything. I think the biggest thing that all funders are looking for is impact, and mostly impact on historically underserved or disadvantaged populations. But again, that's not everyone. But we have some smaller clients who have immense need, but in the long run, it's only going to affect a few people. And unfortunately, that's really hard to get funding for. That's almost something that's better to try to get donors to fund. And then once the program is larger, go for a grant. I've just found that to be the case. But I'm sorry, was there a second part to that question too?
It says, well, they were just saying it would be great to know what is most appealing.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, if it like the impact on the number of people and usually historically underserved or historically disadvantaged populations generally.
I would also add to that. When people ask what do funders want to fund, that can change over time.
Mhm.
And funders don't have one set of ideas about that. At the Community Foundation, for example, we have over 160 funds. A large number of those are donor advised funds. And individual donor advisors will have their own ideas about what to do in terms of what they like to fund. And don't try to read the tea leaves by looking at a 990 or looking at previous grants. That's a record of what has happened in the past. It is not always predictive of what will happen in the future. So understand how you talk about your impact, as Brianna, as you said, and how you can share that with a funder to see whether that's what an individual funder or a collection of funders might be interested in. Funding, grant seeking and grant making both are relational, not transactional. And those relations are based upon full and forthright conversations, questions, co-discovery. We're not interested in compliance or regulations. We're interested in helping you achieve your goals. And the more we understand about what's worked, what hasn't worked, what surprised you in good ways, what surprised you in bad ways, the better we can be a funding partner with you.
Yeah. There's some more questions in the chat. Do you guys want
Yep.
me to read them or you're going to do that?
Yep, I'm gonna go through them now.
Okay.
We have one question from Maria. I'm curious exactly what services Choice Words provide and how to work with you guys.
I will say this quickly because I definitely don't want this to become an ad for us, but we, 95% of what we do is grant writing, and we also do the funder search as well because we have subscriptions to different databases. But I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. And anyone who is interested in our services, we would love to just have a one-on-one Zoom with you, and we can tell you all about us, and you can tell us all about you, and we can talk about how we work. And I just sent that just to Amanda, so let me rewrite that. Hold on. But yeah, the whole gamut of grant writing. There's nothing we won't do.
Well, you don't want to say that, Brianna.
In regards to grant writing, yeah. Won't come clean your house.
All right, next question comes from Jess. You mentioned earlier that some funders know preemptively where their money is going. So how do we establish that relationship with funders / sponsors to get our foot in the door?
I mean, really, I think the only thing you can do with this is just reach out to them with an email or a real letter saying, hey, we think you'd be interested in us because this is what we do. It seems to go perfectly with what you fund. And we'd love to just have a conversation. And, the reason we don't suggest doing that is because most of the time that does not end up helping out at all. If it's a local organization and you know people or people on your board know people, then I think it's worth it to pursue. But, going up to some large corporate foundation or, someone that you have no connection to, I think they just get so many requests that they're really just, it's like, sending in your novel to a Random House. They're really not, they're not
Yeah.
going to look at it unless there's a connection.
I also think it's very important before you have those conversations to do your homework, scour the website. We provide a lot of information on our website. A lot of funders do. And don't ask a question that's already answered on the website because you're busy, we're busy. We put that out there so you can understand a way of doing that homework ahead of time. That helps you have a really productive conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brianna, for answering. Thanks, George, for adding. We have a question from Norb. What role do client success stories play in grant writing, and how best to use them in a grant application?
Yeah, and I think this goes with the next question too. Someone asked about using testimonials.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Amanda said, I think they're great. Depending on the application, you might get an application where there's really no room for that. And if they don't allow attachments, then you can't get it in there. But certainly if there's room or you're allowed to have an extra attachment, absolutely. I think the success stories and testimonials are so powerful. So I would say wherever you can put them in, do it.
Thank you. Next question from Felix, WRFI. Are there any specific recommendations you would make to an organization making its federal grant application?
I'm assuming you mean the first.
First, yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, it's first.
I would just say read the RFP or the NOFO or whatever they call it. Read it 3 times if you have to. Highlight the important things because there's so many little nuances with them. You know, you might find on page 20 that you're actually not eligible because of one tiny little thing. So I would say, you know, make sure that you align perfectly. Make sure that you are registered in all the portals that you need to be registered in. So for federal, that would be SAM and grants.gov. That can be very complicated and take a lot of time. And just make sure it's really appropriate because a lot of federal grants are for larger organizations. And it's one of those things with the chicken with the egg. They're looking for organizations that have experience with federal grants. They want to see that you can manage their money responsibly. But if you've never gotten one before, you know, it's difficult to get it. So, but if it's a great, perfect fit, you've got your ducks in a row, I would say go for it.
I have a question, and I can't really type, so sorry for letting me jump in. So when I'm thinking about grants that I've applied for in the past and looking at grants that existed before I did, because I always try to look at the history of the organization to see how their grants were written. I often see a lot of same information. And I always think that we're going to get dinged if we're just, copy and pasting or repeating the same information on page 12 that we just said on page 8, and do we have to come up with new and creative ways to say the same thing? I'm just curious, like, how a funder would look at that. And I know that's a little granular, but based on how I am as a thinker and a writer, it feels like it's like my dad asking me the same question, hoping the answer is going to change when I was a teenager. So I'm not sure how to navigate the repetitiveness.
Yeah, it's very frustrating sometimes. I think sometimes these grants are written by committee and a lot of well-meaning people are just like, ask this, ask that, ask this. But I would say, I've been told many times, and even in the grants training I did, to never say, see above, see question 3C.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Right, because they're probably not going to do that. So I think it's a bit of a dance. I mean, I would say to reread both questions a few times to see if there is a slight nuance so that you can answer it differently, or it can give you another space to elaborate. Maybe that is a place where you can throw in a testimonial then, if you feel like you've already answered it and answering it in a different way. But I don't think there's any clear answer. I mean, I can definitely say the repetitious questions are, they drive me crazy as well. So I think they're just part of it, part of grant writing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. It looks like we have a great recommendation for choice words from Cheryl. She had a great experience with choice words. And let's see, Steph says, look at match requirements. Some applications require a lot of matching funds. Thanks for sharing that, Steph. And that looks like that's it. Sharon, thank you for your question. That was a great question. But, oh, we have one more. This will be our last one. Can you list some more examples of creative, measurable impact? Your earlier example was number of referrals.
Yeah, I guess just you want to tell us about what Village at Ithaca does, because I think it's sort of dependent on what you do.
Yeah, so I love this. We're a youth and family centered organization. And essentially, we work to establish anti-racist systems and programming in order to advocate for our youth and families in whatever way they see fit. We work in three parts, which is system change. We work for youth in family advocacy. Sometimes that looks like working in court systems or making sure that these families have the support that they need in school systems. And we also do youth and family mentorship. So we do different programs for our students to make sure they have everything they need. But because some of the data, as listed in your early example with like mental health, is very individual, it's things that really can't be shared with other people, especially when you're dealing with like youth and like families that could be tied up in certain like legal things. We can't really share information. So essentially, when we do like share our reports on things, we can share like demographics, like, oh, you know, the majority of families we helped out this year were people of color. They're like, you know, whatever that looks like. But I think when people are asking for specifics about like families, it's like, I don't know, it's hard to like not share people's personal information. You know what I mean? So like with the example you used for like number of referrals, like I love that because we get referred to by a lot of like our sister programs, which is like really cool. However, I don't know, I feel like usually when I'm writing reports up for the grants that we do, I find it hard to like share information that's usually like locked up. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely a problem that I see with a lot of organizations. And I mean, one of the things I suggest to a lot of people, but I don't know if it would be appropriate for your population or not, is just something as easy as like a pre and post survey that's completely confidential, you know, make it with Google Forms, takes 3 minutes, at least for like, I'm thinking like youth mentorship. You know, did you enjoy the program? Did you learn anything? Something like that. Would you recommend it to a friend or something like that? So you could say even like, you know, 90% of participants said they would tell a friend to use it, you know, something like that. But yeah, it's tough with advocacy too. And with when you're looking at long-term outcomes and systemic change, that's a hard question. I mean, you can look at the community overall, maybe sort of like what kind of things are going on in the community that maybe change because of your services. But yes, it's hard to measure. Yeah, that's something to keep thinking about. I don't know. Amanda, do you have any other ideas?
I think it is hard. And I almost think like maybe trying something and seeing what comes of it and then trying something else. Like it might take a little bit to find like the sweet spot, the right thing. But I'd also be happy to talk with you more about that offline too.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you can reach out. I'll put my email in the chat.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that great question, Jess. And in the interest of time and to respect everyone's afternoon, I'm just going to share this shameless plug for our events that are coming up. Tomorrow we have our grant cycle Q&A. So I will be hosting that tomorrow afternoon. And then we have a site visit on Friday for at the Science Center. That's coming up. And then we have our Let's Talk program, Community Health and Wellness. We're going to have Adrienne Western from Cayuga Health join us. And then we have our Equality for All in 2024. Our Women's Fund Advisory Committee is putting together that program. So lots of great stuff going on at the Community Foundation. So we welcome you to join us and engage with us. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. Hopefully we'll see you at some upcoming events, but we want to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you to Amanda and Brianna for being here, for the wealth of information that you've shared, tips and tricks and just wonderful ideas. My hope is that you all watching at home or watching the recording or joining us today learned a few things that you can use to help strengthen your grant application, not just for our cycle, but for all of the funding opportunities out there. So thank you
I have a
all on
question.
this
I'm
call
sorry.
again. Yes.
Hang on, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the answer to whether or not the slides would be available.
Yes.
The answer is
Yes.
yes. Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
The answer is yes. And because you registered or you submitted your email when you logged on, I have all of your email addresses. So check your email and I will send both the recording and the slides to you directly because you all are special and you spent this afternoon with me. So I'm not going to make you go out and search for it. So it will be in your inbox. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for joining right at 1 o'clock. If you all have any questions, you all know where to find me. Please reach out. And thank you again to Amanda and Brianna and George. And thank you all for joining. Take care, everyone.
Bye.